Eren Yeager is probably one of the most discussed and complex protagonists in the anime community over the last couple of years, not just because of the mind-blowing and edge-of-the-seat storytelling of the Attack on Titan series, but also because of his immense character development from start till the end and the culmination of various complex layers of characterization that has been provided to his character for the growth of the plot in general. You can clearly sense that this immense growth in the character is what drives the complete plot of season 4. Where the first 3 seasons were driven completely by the story, the final season of AOT is completely driven by Eren's character. Eren's changed character is literally the cause of every incident during the final season. So in this video we will discuss in depth and analyze the character of Eren Yeager, how it changed during the course of the entire plot of the series, what effects it had on the plot and the other characters, and what was the true psychology of this amazing character which literally divided the community and made the fans question the darkest truths about humanity and their similarities in our own real world. Let's interpret Eren's character season by season chronologically with all the life-changing events that he goes through. This will allow us to better understand his character towards the end of this video and most importantly the changes his characters get subjected to which made him the person towards the end of the show. During the beginning of the show, Eren is shown as a very aggressive kid, always picking up fights with the bullies against the injustice they do to the other weaker kids like his friend Armin. He does not like to be controlled by anyone in any way, and even as a child he has a strong sense of freedom in his actions and thoughts. He is a completely fearless and aggressive kid who tries to solve all his problems through the means of violence. In just the first episode itself we can see his aggressive and rebellion nature multiple times. His conversation with Hannes, his anger on the public who calls the scouts useless, then arguing with his mother and father, and then fighting for his friend Armin. This particular quality separates him from the other normal kids because he is not just an angry kid. Eren is dangerously violent with an extreme hatred towards any form of injustice. So much so that this hatred often blinds him with an uncontrollable rage of destruction. He is even disturbingly shown stabbing and killing the kidnappers of Mikasa at a mere age of 10. This vicious characteristic of Eren is shown by Isayama during the start of season 1 to solidify his behavior in the minds of the audience as a foreshadow to all the destruction and genocide Eren does during the final season. Isayama was building Eren for the climax of the show from the very beginning of the plot. Eren is also shown as a kid who always yearns for freedom. He wants to explore the outside world beyond the walls, so much so that he even wants to join the survey corps and become a scout just to go beyond the walls, to know about the outside world and be free from the life of a cattle he has been living inside those cage-like walls. He knows that the world outside the walls is a very dangerous place filled with ruthless titans ready to devour any human, but still he considers dying as a scout beyond the walls a privilege than being stuck inside that cage as a cattle for all his life. He always had a fascination with the outside world, unlike the other civilians who thought of the world beyond the walls as a taboo to their culture. This fascination was even more augmented by the book of the outside world that Armin always used to show him. Ocean made of salt, fiery water, lands of ice, sandy snowfields. It was Eren's dream to see this spectacle in reality someday. Another obsessive characteristic that makes him commit the rumbling for his freedom towards the end of the show. Eren is also shown to have a characteristic of a true friend during the first season itself. He is someone who deeply cares for his friends as well as his comrades. He is shown to lose control over his rage when Annie as the female titan massacres his fellow soldiers during the scouting operation. He is even ready to give his life for the sake of his friendship. This can be confirmed when he literally throws himself inside the mouth of the titan to save his best friend Armin when he was about to get devoured. Despite losing a leg in the battle, Eren collects the last of his remaining strength and uses it to save his dear friend. This kind of dedication towards friendship is beyond ordinary. Yes, it is true that the closest friends help each other even in the worst of situations and sometimes even sacrifice something dear to them if the situation demands such an action, but giving one's own life to save their friend's life is something you must have heard rarely ever in your life. This is the kind of rare friend Eren is shown in the plot of the the series. These deeply embedded characteristics of extreme aggression, obsession for freedom, and heartful friendship are used to define Eren's personality in the first season itself. And if you notice these core attributes and qualities of his character, you can clearly relate them with the reasons why he caused the rumbling and the genocide during the climax of the show. It was these three specific qualities of Eren which made him commit something as grave as the mass genocide of the outside world. Because of all these characteristics as his inherent nature, Eren was already fated to be the cause of all the destruction right from the very beginning of the show. There were also many incidents that changed Eren's thought process and affected his perspective towards the world in which he lives in. These incidents are the primary reasons for character growth and eventually the growth of the plot in the story. During the first episode, Eren faces the true wrath of the Titans. He sees the Titans for the very first time in his life. He experiences the brutal massacre of the people of his town, crushed, ripped apart, and chewed like insects. He even helplessly sees his own mother getting killed and eaten by the smiling Titan. All this brutal and nasty horror Eren experiences at the mere age of 10. This gruesome incident and tragedy adds another mission and layer to his character. Filled once again with an uncontrollable rage, Eren swears to kill all the Titans from this world. This incident sets him on a predestined path filled with anger and hatred. Further, he finds out a little deeper about the Titan powers as he himself possessed the power of a Titan, the beings he hated the most in his life. And the fact that his father was involved behind his secret Titan shifting powers convolutes his emotions even more. He learns from his commander Erwin Smith that they are infiltrated by enemies and traitors all along, and he must rethink who his actual enemies were. He then faces the betrayal by Annie, who massacres his comrades during the Scouts operation, leaving him devastated and disoriented towards the nature of the real world and the people around him. These couple of incidents matures Eren with the truth of the society he is a part of and makes him understand that there is more purpose to his life than just going on a rampage and obliterating the Titans. He now needed to dive into an even more intricate and complex scenario that he never even thought of, and hence he sidelines his Titan annihilation desires and focuses more maturely towards finding out the truth hiding inside the basement, about his father and most importantly about the outside world and the Titans. Further into the next season, Eren finds out about the actual traitors inside his regiment. Reiner and Berthold, one of his closest friends and fellow comrades, were the armored and the colossal Titan shifters who were responsible for the mass massacre of the people of Shiganshina and the death of Eren's mother on that fateful day. This reveal was heartbreaking and devastating for someone like Eren, who considered his friends more precious than his own life. This epic betrayal finally breaks him free from his limited and short-sighted perspective of the world and made him realize that the Titans were merely tools for all the chaos and destruction. The real culprits were some other people outside his influence who yielded this power of destruction. One thing we must notice here is that Eren was kidnapped by Reiner and Berthold. He very clearly takes his stand against the genocidal actions of both the traitors with his same old compulsive and enraged behavior, the only response and retaliation method Eren is known for. He calls them psychotic mass murderers who doesn't deserve to be called humans anymore because they killed so many innocent people, men, women and children. And we all know what happens in the end. Eren becomes the same as Reiner. He became the same monster he hated the most. But we will discuss all of this later in the video. This particular conversation between Eren and Reiner shows us what Eren's psychology was back when he was unaware of the truth of the real world. His thought process was the same as that of any other human beings. He cared for the innocents and showed us his humanity just like the other characters. But the journey of a hero to that of a villain had just started. Further, Eren loses yet another of his dear friend Hannes and many other comrades who came to his rescue from the cruelty of the outside people and their unknown evil plans. His young mind began to radicalize towards these unknown people of the outside world as a response to their hatred towards him and his people. The story in the third season further complicates through the introduction of the intricate politics and drama that carries out among the people within these walls, which solidifies the role of humans as the root cause of all the chaos and destruction in their own world. Eren learns about the history of the royal family, about his friend Historia Rice, and even more about the Titan shifting powers and its association with his father. During the moments inside the chamber when Eren was tied to get eaten by Historia, we can see the vulnerable and human side of Eren filled with guilt for the sins of his father, who massacred the Rice family for the powers of the founding Titan, and which further caused all the chaos inside the walls from the people of the outside world. Eren here, in the true sense, gave up on his life burdened by the guilt from the death of countless innocent people. This is a very important scene in the show because the psychology of Eren shown here completely contrasts with the psychology he develops during the final season or the Marley arc of the show. This scene of Eren's atonement shows that he cared for the other innocent lives far greater than his own life at this moment of his life. Though he still had those dreams of discovering the world outside the walls and finally be free, the dreams for which Eren's character is actually known for, but at this particular and single moment in the show, he gives up on those dreams without even fulfilling them for the betterment of humanity inside the walls and the people in his life for whom he cared about. This scene and psychology of Eren at this point should be kept in our minds because further into the final season, Eren's antagonist mindset completely negates his protagonist mindset of the previous seasons despite having the same values, principles and dreams throughout the show. This is a major reason why most people are unable to figure out that was Eren a protagonist or the antagonist of the show. Maybe in this case the answer is not as simple as the question itself. But by the end of this analysis, I hope we will get to a clearer picture of Eren's character. There is a very important incident that happens in Eren's life after the Rice family story arc. Eren learns about his mother's philosophy about life and about himself through her eyes. This philosophy shaped Eren's life and mindset, the unshakable resolution to keep moving forward in the preceding years. He is already special because he was born into this world. This is the line that Eren reiterates many times during different phases of his life. His mother's views show him a deeper perspective of his life. Eren realized that being born and being alive itself was the most extraordinary event that had ever happened to him. This view of life etched deep into his soul and guided his actions until the very end. The view that he deserved all the freedom and happiness that the world had to offer. Freedom to live his life and to make choices was his birthright, and he must do everything possible to protect his birthright. But the return to Shiganshina arc leaves Eren helpless by the chaos and destruction brought upon by the people of the outside world upon him and his comrades. This traumatizing event makes him realize his extremely vulnerable state in this world and that he is far away from the freedom that he always dreamt of. He was a slave to the brutality of the outside world. He sees many of his comrades and even his best friend Armin dying in the battle with whom he promised to discover the vast world beyond those miserable walls. All these constant, unexplained, provocative events to a person like Eren were enough to push his mental sanity to the extreme edge of morality. The final push to Eren's humanity was brought upon with the discovery of the reality of the outside world. In his father's memories, Eren literally lives through the extreme slavery and injustice he always despised with all his heart. The cruelty of the Marlians towards his Eldian race was appalling for his young mind. He repeatedly lives through the barbaric moment of Grisha's 8-year-old sister Faye Yeager, who was fed to the dogs like an animal. The disfigured corpse of that child left a deep impact on Eren's mind. His dream of absolute freedom was now permanently eclipsed by the barbarism Faye was subjected to. Even the cruelty towards the other Eldians and their terrible suffering shocked the entire existence of Eren, where he himself started questioning the possibility of his own dreams. Eren was now completely radicalized. The immense hate of the entire world killed the morality that was once very well present inside him. The final nail to the coffin of Eren's humanity was during the medal ceremony in the royal palace when Eren saw the future through the paths for the very first time. He realized the inevitability of his role in the destiny of this cruel world. Eren reached to a point of no return, and by the end of season 3, upon reaching the sea, the death of Eren the Saviour, the protagonist, was finally complete. If you watch season 4 of the show and then reflect back upon the previous seasons, you will realize that the first 3 seasons feel like the backstory of a villain or like a prologue of the story of Attack on Titan. Every aspect of the story from this point onwards feels somewhat altered, a new setting with new characters and most importantly a whole new perspective of those who were once declared the villains of the show. Eren was ready to commit the mass genocide, and it is this final arc of the show which allows us to connect the remaining pieces of Eren's complex mind and psychology. During the entire season, you will notice a turmoil going inside the mind of Eren. Despite being the most powerful of all physically and putting on a veil of cold-blooded revolutionary on his face, he is shown to be very vulnerable mentally at many points in this final arc due to the intensity of the crimes and genocide he commits in the outside world. You will continuously notice Eren seeking justification for his causes. During his conversation with Falco in the mental asylum, he pushes the context about the people who go to war and create the hell for many uncountable other people, and then he quotes about the people who were born in this war-plagued environment and says that these people had no other choices but to go through that hell in search of hope or maybe even another hell. Though Falco was unable to understand the meaning behind this conversation, we the viewers who already had the context clearly know that he is indicating himself and Falco as the people born in this environment. Eren was also simultaneously trying to justify the genocide he was going to commit soon. Eren could have chosen to remain silent at this point, but since he was constantly battling his human side buried deep inside of himself, he chooses to pour out his vulnerability in the form of this conversation. Just like this instance, we can see the morality inside of Eren resurfacing repeatedly either in the form of conversations or in the form of human emotions, despite Eren desperately trying to hide it from the others. In the 5th episode, Declaration of War, where Eren meets Reiner after 4 years, we can see the episode starting with Berthold quoting about his dreams about the old man who told them about his life before committing suicide. Berthold forms the conclusion that the old man told them his story before hanging himself was not because he wanted any kind of forgiveness, but it seemed that he wanted to be judged by someone. And then the shot cuts directly to the scene between Eren and Reiner. This overlaying of two separate scenes and contexts clearly indicates that Eren, just as that old man, wanted to be at least judged for his barbaric and heinous crimes that he was about to commit now. During his conversation with Reiner, Eren addresses about the difference of opinion he had now after living with the people of Marley beyond the ocean. He says that just like Reiner, he thought that everyone in the outside world was evil and was an enemy for him. But after meeting them, he came to know that there were good people too in the outside world who kept humanity alive. But the outside world was brainwashed into believing that he and his people were the demons who would destroy everyone. So he had no other choice, and for the sake of his own people, he had to keep moving forward until he destroyed all his enemies. At this point, again Eren had this conversation with Reiner just to justify his actions by relating himself to the same place and situation as that of Reiner when he infiltrated inside the walls. Another example to prove that Eren's humanity was stopping him from committing this genocide, but he had no other choice to suppress his guilt through these sporadic justifications. Eren even cried on the death of his close friend Shasha, where he showed human emotions in the final season for the very first time. He even freed Ymir from her eternal slavery after knowing how the little girl went through the same injustice and cruelty of the world he himself had gone through, making her realize that she was free to choose her actions because she was not a slave nor a god. She was just a person bound by no one, and he was there to save her and carry the burden she was carrying for the past 2000 years. This speech by Eren for Ymir was like a direct interaction to the audience, signifying that behind the mask of a heartless and soulless murderer, there was still a shred of humanity left inside of him. But the biggest evidence which showed that Eren was not inherently evil despite committing the most evil war crime was the rumbling scene during the end of the show. Eren was strolling in the city of Marley, where he found the same kind of people as there were inside the walls of Paradis Island. He was constantly thinking about how he was about to kill all these people brutally through the rumbling. He questions himself about what his mom would think about such inhuman atrocities he was about to bring on these innocent people. He even thinks about going forward with Zeke's euthanization plan for a second. At this point, Eren was drowning in the ocean of guilt. This extreme guilt even makes him save the little boy Ramsey from the goons despite knowing the fact that soon in the future he will kill this little boy too. The inner but subdued human inside Eren keeps cursing himself and addressing himself himself as someone even worse than Reiner, who himself killed uncountable people on the day they breached Wall Maria. This unfathomable guilt of Eren finally breaks his emotional barriers, and with uncontrollable tears down his eyes, he starts to apologize to the child helplessly, as he was the one who, despite knowing the true course of the future and being the sole cause of it, could not change it for the sake of those countless innocent lives. On so many instances, Eren's strong reluctance to the plan of genocide showed that he was still a human on the deeper levels of his identity. So why, despite such a strong resistance from his inner self, he still continued with his aberrant plans? It was all because of his inherent nature, a strong desire to just being a free person. There are no set of complex rules and conditions for Eren to be this way. Even his other friends were born in similar conditions just like him, but it was just Eren who was madly passionate about being free. He was just born with an innate hunger and desire for absolute freedom.
俺とあんたが同じだと思ってたようだが、間違っている。他人から自由を奪われるくらいなら、俺はそいつから自由を奪う。
Eren from the very beginning was very clear about one idea in his life. If someone tries to take away his freedom, he will not hesitate to take away their freedom first, irrespective of the actions and consequences he must go through for it. Eren was so obsessed with this form of freedom that he almost became a slave to those desires. This inherent nature of Eren, the true monster inside of him, was so powerful and strong that despite his moral resistance and inner humanity, he still wasn't able to suppress it. Remember how quickly his thoughts of going forward with Zeke's plan was subdued by himself, saying that he just cannot accept an end like that, even if he had to commit a mass genocide. But Eren's view of freedom was even more twisted than we as the viewers who followed him from the very beginning of the journey ever thought it to be. There was even a deeper reason when Eren says to Reiner that I am the same as you. Reiner kept moving forward through that hell and killed thousands of innocent people inside the walls, not just because he was radicalized and brainwashed about the Eldians to be devils, but because Reiner deep inside his heart had a desire to be a hero for his people and earn the respect he and his mother never got from his own people their entire life. Reiner's motivations were selfish and sinful. Similarly, Eren had a twisted view of that freedom. He did all the destruction and the genocide not only for his friends but also for himself. During his conversations with Ramsey, Eren reveals that he was pushed to commit this crime not just to save his friends but because of the utter disappointment he faced when he came to know that humanity outside the world had survived and was even thriving beyond his thoughts. Eren always dreamt of a world outside the walls as a blank slate, where he and his friends would go on and discover its vastness bothered by no one. He knew that in this thriving world, no matter where he would venture out, there would always be those people who would consider him and his friends as the devils. There would be no end of hate and suffering towards his race. So having no other choice but to fight against this injustice, he brought himself to the conclusion of a mass destruction, a product of the inherent violent nature for which he was known for, to obtain a world of absolute freedom. This was a type of ideal world Eren always desired it to be. Though it was an extremely unrealistic and impractical world, but still it was Eren's reality, or to be specific, a very twisted reality. This is the reason why we can see Eren transformed as a kid during the rumbling over the top of the Titan steam clouds, a world where he always dreamt of as a child, a world of just nothingness. Armin once said that the ones who can abandon everything are the ones who are capable of bringing the change. Armin's life itself is the biggest example of this quote. Armin had a dream of seeing the vast world beyond the walls, the sea, the river of fire, the lands of ice and fields of sand. Yet he instantly abandoned his dreams and gave up his life for his friends, especially for Eren, so that he could fulfill that dream on his behalf. Even Erwin Smith, the commander of the Scouts, had a lifelong dream of knowing the truth about this world and the world beyond the walls. He even sacrificed countless lives of his own comrades for the sake of his selfish desires. But in the end, even he gave up on those dreams for the sake of saving humanity when there were no other options left. His sacrifice in the war helped his comrades to finally reach the truth of the outside world. On the contrary, Eren was just unable to build this mindset and abandon his nature and its desires. Even though he had to destroy the world, Eren would make sure to keep moving forward until he fulfills those desires, even though those desires were impractical and irrational. Eren was the one who could not fight his nature, no matter what extent of monster he had to become for that, no matter what destruction it meant to make that dream a reality. Unlike Armin, Eren was a slave to his desires. Just like Kenny Ackerman once said that everyone had to be drunk on something to keep pushing on, everyone was a slave to something. People like Erwin, Reiner, and especially Eren were from the very beginning drunk on their dreams and desires, which kept them moving forward as if their life was dependent on this addiction, even without bothering about the consequences and even without thinking about that particular moment when they would reach their goal. They just kept moving forward being drunk on their dreams. As we already know that Eren was just born with such a cursed nature, his meaning of life was nothing more than a depressed and cruel reality. So he created the concept of this impractical freedom to escape from this harsh truth of the world. Eren all his life wasn't able to live in the moment, as was explained by Armin to Zeke when he met him in the paths. Armin always saw life as something full of hope and optimism despite witnessing the worst horrors ever. He was able to accept the nature of reality as it was and found the meaning of life and his purpose in living through those beautiful moments he was already blessed upon. Armin wholeheartedly cherished playing and running with his friends up to the hill to such an extent that he thought to himself that he was born just to race on and on with his dear friends. The same feeling he would get when he would read his books in the rainy season, or feeding nuts to the squirrels, or even walking in the market alley with Eren and Mikasa. Armin was able to enjoy those little moments consciously. Armin in general is symbolized as the most free person in the story of Attack on Titan. He was the one who was the master of his mind and his desires, and not the other way around. On the other hand, Eren's mind was always clouded by his irrational desires, never accepting the way of life as it already was. During the end, even Eren realized that whatever destruction he had done, he did it for himself because he wanted to see this sight. He wanted to see the world of his dreams. He knew that he was a sinner, but now it was too late to reverse his crimes, and so overburdened by this guilt, he allowed his friends to finally kill him when the ratio of the people of the outside world was decimated and made equal to that of the population of Paradis Island. Drunk on his desires for freedom, Eren just kept moving forward from one hell to another, finally accepting the fact that he was just a fool, an idiot who was given immense amounts of power, and this was the type of resolution he landed about in the end. Summing up the legacy, Eren was really a tragic character, but also a fascinating one with incredible layers and complexities engraved in his creation, and this intricate characterization was the best part of him as a character. His characterization did not just make him a standout persona in the anime world, but also made the show itself a standout masterpiece, ranking as one of the most popular anime in the modern days. Eren Yeager as a character literally redefined the process of creating a protagonist and an antagonist like the two sides of a coin, allowing both the possibilities to exist at the same time. His character showed us that a lead character is also capable of replicating the complexities of psychologies which are often witnessed in our real world, rather than being forced with the same old boring shenanigans of rigid nobility. Eren as a character showed us the real horrors and terrible choices a person goes through when the cruelty of our world barges into one's life and destroys it mercilessly. How hatred is boundless and therefore crushes even the most formidable willpowers, resulting in everlasting cycles of war and destruction, and how even the main character and his or her ideologies can be a topic of debate and be judged long after their stories are done and dusted.